You lost your right to own firearms and want to know what you can do about it. This is Alan with Quarter Horse Arms, and before I go into that stuff, let me give you my disclaimer. You need to check the laws in your state. They do vary tremendously. I would certainly check with an attorney as well. So, having said all of that silly stuff, how could you have lost your right to own a gun? Well, commit a felony for starters. Another way would be things like drug offenses that would fall under the Brady law. Domestic violence, even misdemeanor, will keep you from being able to own guns. And that, when we're talking about domestic violence, we're talking even about what you would think would be minor things, but in fact, when it comes to domestic violence, they're pretty serious. Things like stalking, endangerment, you're violating an order of protection. So basically, you're a dumbass. The other way I talked about once before, which is ERPOs, Extreme Risk Protection Orders. Because as soon as you have a temporary order in place, you lose your firearms, and you go onto the FBI NICS thing as a red flag. You do not get a gun. Other way to not be able to own firearms is have mental health issues. And I don't mean like you're depressed or having a bad day. I'm talking about things like you were tried in court and found not guilty by reason of insanity, or you were involuntarily incarcerated in a mental health facility, or you have a serious mental disability. Other ways, have gun violations, or a dishonorable discharge. Those two last things are, one is kind of funny to me, and the only reason I think it's funny is as far as the gun violations go. I was called in for jury duty, and during jury selection, the judge asked the people that were empaneled if they had any questions for him, and so some guy raised his hand and goes, yeah, Your Honor, how do I go about getting my right to own guns back? And the judge looked at him funny for a second and said, wait a minute, weren't you in my court like a month or two ago? And he goes, yeah. And he goes, what were you here for? And he says, a weapons violation. And the judge just said, forget it, and everyone else is laughing. All right, the other one that I don't, it's not funny, but getting a dishonorable discharge from the military will prevent you from owning a gun. On the one hand, you can argue that if you're in the military, you're going to be held to a higher standard. On the other hand, there's a lot of different ways you can get a dishonorable discharge. And I've always had kind of an issue with that. I mean, there's nothing I can do about it. But it seems to me someone who's being dishonorably discharged for, beating the crap out of their officer versus someone who's being dishonorably discharged because he wasn't smart enough to come back from leave on time and doing it repeatedly. They're little different things. But be that as it may, there's a bunch of different ways that you can petition to get your right to own guns back. Many states have them. North Carolina, despite what people would say about it, has been, I'd like to say, proactive. There's basically, in this state, there's three ways to get your gun back, or your right to own guns back. One, you can petition the governor. It's not likely to happen. And for a number of reasons, I would imagine they get swamped with, requests for pardon for various offenses. On the other hand, you also have to keep in mind this guy or this lady or whoever has to be reelected every 4 years. And taking a gamble on a previously convicted felon or a domestic violence charge, against you, they're taking a risk with their career, and I can't imagine many people willing to do that. All right, but let's assume the pardon doesn't work. In many states, including North Carolina, if you've committed a felony and it's a non-violent felony, you can get, or you can at least petition the court to get your right to own a gun back. And if you were, and I could be misremembering it, but I think I've got it straight, is if you were incarcerated, you can petition after 20 years after your sentence was up. So once you've met your obligations, let a couple decades go by. You can also, when you petition the court in this state, it's a $200 filing fee. And that does not include any lawyer fees that you might want. And should this ever happen to you, I would say get an attorney. They're going to know the law a lot better than you will. And you have to consider that when you go to court to attempt to restore your right to own firearms, the onus or the burden of proof is on you. You have to demonstrate why you would be someone that they should restore gun ownership rights to. And, trust me, they're going to look at records and everything else, so I would just check things out before you waste money going to court. I mean, give you an example. I don't know what the outcome was, but got a call one day. A guy wanted to know if he could get his right to gun ownership restored. Now, I've already told you I really don't know a whole lot about it. But, being curious, I had to ask what the offense was. Well, when he was 15, he stole a car. And he's 40 now. And wanted to restore the right. I don't know if he ever followed up. So I Googled it at the time for him. I mean, it looked like he could make a reasonable case that he'd been an upstanding citizen since then. All right, and then that's a presumption on my part. Okay, so the first way is a pardon. Second way is basically petitioning the court. The third way is getting your record expunged. It's kind of a thing that I know North Carolina does it. I know there are several other states that do it. And what the expunging or expungement does is if you've committed, things like nonviolent felonies after 10 years, when you request the thing to be expunged, it disappears. There's no longer a record of it. So the case has already been settled, whatever consequence you were given has already been done. So what they're doing is an attempt to give people a leg up, or maybe get a better chance at doing something right. And for I think misdemeanors or minors who did it, they can expunge it after 5 years. So getting it expunged means it never happened. However, if it was violent, or a violent felony, or domestic violence, or something like that, it's not going to happen. They're very clear about that. So, first off, avoid the situation. Second, if you can't avoid it, deal with it the best you can. And if you have lost your right to own guns, do not get caught with them. That is a federal felony. So, having said all that, and I know I'm broadcasting this podcast out to people who I'm willing to bet 99.99% of you have a non-issue with that because it hasn't happened. But you never know. Okay, so Call, email, 919-808-6480. That's for phone or text. The website's quarterhorsearms.com. And you can email us at info@quarterhorsearms.com. This is Alan with Quarter Horse Arms in Snow Camp, North Carolina. I hope this is helpful to many of you, and I am hoping, and really hoping, that this is completely unnecessary for you guys. Have a great day.